Are there bad episodes of Bluey? This is one of the most beloved and critically acclaimed shows of all time, captivating generations. But it also has over 150 episodes. Surely there are some flops in there, right? So I went over to IMDb and put the rating of every single episode into a spreadsheet and found the most hated episode of Bluey, and I actually did not expect what I found. Good morning, I'm Joel Lamb, and I do want to emphasize that while this ranking is not my opinion, it is the collective rating of hundreds of fans and critics. I will be throwing around my 2 cents quite a bit and telling you whether or not I think the low rating for each episode discussed is justified. Also, several of these episodes share a rating, so I rank them by how many people rated them. Okay, with that out of the way, let's start with Helicopters, with a score of 7.5 out of 10. Helicopters follows Bluey after discovering that she can't go on a playdate after school because of unforeseen circumstances. She finds a stump and decides to play helicopter. Throughout the episode, she slowly and steadily learns the important life lesson of letting go. Shut up, Elsa. I like this episode because it really does take its time to slowly, incrementally teach its lesson. Bluey starts by not wanting anyone to even touch her helicopter, to by the end of the episode letting other people drive it, letting it get hit by a rocket, and even changing it into an airplane. Sometimes you have to sacrifice your own enjoyment for someone else's, and that's okay. Also, can I point out how this episode has Winton saying that his parents are divorced and that his dad owns a pool? A seemingly innocent piece of information. Unless you've seen The Sign. You know, the longest and second most acclaimed episode in the entire show, where the pivotal turning point of the entire plot only happens because Winton's dad is divorced and had a pool. I don't think that was the plan when they wrote Helicopter over an entire season earlier, but I nearly screamed watching The Sign the first time and seeing that happen. Bluey doesn't normally have this much continuity, so I love that small detail. Now, why is Judo not bald? But why is this one of the least liked episodes of Bluey? My best guess is that it's relatively episodic, with one thing happening after another without a major connecting thread. On top of that, the moral of the story is set up pretty early on, so you can probably see it coming from a mile away, which makes the whole build-up seem tedious. But the real reason I think this episode is so low rated is how Bluey holds this stick. I know this is a kid show, I know that is a helicopter, and maybe I just have a dirty mind. Come on. But also Jack is in this episode, so it can't possibly be bad. So I'm giving this an unjustified rating. This episode deserved better. Moving on to Tickle Crab. This episode starts with Bandit telling the kids how awesome it is to have a true love who will always be there for you. Only for Chili to immediately abandon him when the kid suggests playing Tickle Crabs. After that, Bandit's character mopes for the rest of the episode about his lack of a true love, while having to suffer through the Tickle Crabs. Hi, I'm Joel Lamb. I don't like Bandit abuse. What I do like, however, is when people subscribe to my YouTube channel. By the end of this episode, Bandit learns the important life lessons of self-reliance, yada yada, a justified rating. Shown is an episode where Bandit's hand is an emu. So, like, you know Unicorse and how funny he is? This is like a season 1 version of that, but with none of the personality and humor. Bluey learns the important life lesson of taking care of pets, being assertive. I don't know, my cat still won't listen to anything I say after watching this episode.
Hey boy, come here boys. Come here, hey, sit up, do a spin, pick up the garbage. Come here boys, come here. You're useless.
Also, I know he brought it upon himself, but I still don't like Bandit abuse. But what I do like is when people subscribe. Justified rating. Next up is The Adventure. No, that can't be right. Yeah, no, one of my favorite episodes of all time is on the list of worst Bluey episodes. What is there to dislike about The Adventure? This episode shows Bluey and Chloe telling the story of the brave princess who finds a greedy queen who has been turning crops into sand and town folks into stone, and it's an epic cinematic masterpiece that deserves respect. It has amazing music, spectacular cinematography, and lore. I have literally made an entire video on this episode. The only reason I can guess that The Adventure is negatively reviewed is that the terriers being terrible, and the end being a bit anticlimactic. But other than that, this is literally one of my favorite episodes ever. For that reason, this rating is unjustified. Alright, what's next? Mums and Dads? What episode is that again? Oh yeah, the gender roles one. You know, one of my favorite things about Bluey is that it avoids politics. Anyway, this episode shows Mackenzie and Indy playing moms and dads when, oh no, they can't decide who goes to work and who stays at home with the kids. And they don't want to play with each other anymore. Whatever shall we do? Then we spend the rest of the episode swapping between the two of them as Indy tries to find a suitable father and Mackenzie is Bluey's baby. I think that this is an interesting thing because Bluey episodes are only 7 minutes long, meaning that they almost never have diverging plots like this. You swap back and forth so rapidly that neither of them are that memorable. And how do you resolve this episode? By Mackenzie and Rusty getting so tired of the other kids' nonsense that they decide that maybe both moms and dads can either work or stay at home. Wow, so revolutionary. What is it, 1950s? I mean, to be fair, it's not a bad moral. And that combined with the sheer absurdity and hilarious that this episode can be, I can't really say that it's a bad. So I guess I'll just put it as unjustified, but just barely. Consider yourself lucky, moms and dads. This next episode is probably surprising, but next up is Blue Mountains. I think every Bluey enjoyer has heard horror stories about this episode, to the point where I have said this in a previous video.
Wait, wasn't there a fairy in Blue Mountains? You couldn't pay me to talk about that episode.
So I would have expected this video to be much further down, but whatever. I am a changed man now, and also I am monetized. Watch this! So the healers are having a picnic, and I think Dad wanted a nap, so they decided to play a game with their hand, where Dad is a big mountain they need to climb over, and they all my jumping jumper shoes! Why does it look like that? Oh no, I'm gonna barf! So up to this point in the show, it had become a thing where every couple of episodes they would do this zoom in effect where the animation gets a lot more detailed for no reason, and it's kind of uncanny, but it's one scene out of an otherwise normal episode. Until Blue Mountains, which is literally the entire episode. I can see why people don't like this episode. The weird long arms, the unproportional everything, the impossible hand movements. Did nobody watch this episode before it came out? Is this a big practical joke? I don't know. What I do know is this episode makes me very unhappy looking at it. And while I could probably discuss this plot and the moral and the potential implied lore, I don't want to look at this anymore, and neither do you. Justified. Moving on. Hey, we're finally out of the 7.5s and into the 7.4s, starting with good old typewriter. This episode shows Bluey on a quest to find the real typewriter because she doesn't like Calypso's story and she wants to rewrite it. Along the way, she, Winton, and Snickers are stopped by the Terriers. That is the fourth episode on this list with Winton and the Terriers. Each of them use what they perceived as negative traits to get around the Terriers. Snickers' lankiness, Winton's space invaderiness, and then Bluey just makes believe as a shield. I think the reason why this episode is so far down is because it doesn't really have a cohesive theme. Bluey wants to rewrite Calypso's story, but also Snickers is upset because he can't do things non-sausage dogs can do, and also Winton's upset because everybody's always running away from him, and also Calypso stole the typewriter to teach Bluey the lesson of using her imagination. You know, Bluey's most defining trait? I have no idea what the moral of this story is. Despite all this, I don't think I can say that it's a bad episode. It's pretty fun at parts, and overall, inoffensive. Maybe I'm going easy on typewriters because I just watched Blue Mountains, but whatever. I am going to say that this is unjustified. Now what's next? Oh. Chicken Rat! This episode shows Bingo and her family searching for Bingo's stuffed rabbit Floppy, but it takes an interesting narrative approach that starts at the end of an evening full of shenanigans and spends the rest of the episodes retracing the steps of the kids, telling the entire story in reverse. I think that is cool. I don't think IMDb agrees with me. To be fair, this episode can be confusing on first watch through, and the gross out humor of Bandit's burping seems unnecessary. Actually, apparently originally, Bandit sneezed instead of burped, but it was changed not to make light of allergies. I think this is valid. This episode was an experiment, and there is no such thing as a failed experiment. So for that reason, I'ma give this an unjustified. Another day by your side, showing you all the world's magic, magic. The next episode is magic. I have discussed this episode in depth previously in my first Bluey lore analysis, so I think I'm biased, but come on! Magic? A bad episode. Magic shows Bluey teaching Bingo how to play magic.
No, really?
They use this magic to force the adults to play with them, and then Chili shows up and has an epic magic fight. Yes, this is an episode of Bluey with an epic fun fight scene.
How can you say this is a bad episode?
Okay, but seriously, there is something off about this episode that just kind of feels wrong. But as I mentioned earlier, I already solved why that is and how this episode fits into the larger Bluey lore in a previous video. So I don't care. Unjustified.
Hey, can you see me? That's because I'm hiding. I'm a spy.
Can you tell I'm running out of ideas for transitions? The next episode is Spy Games. Another episode that I discussed back in my original Bluey lore video. Bingo's big sad because the other kids don't respect her contributions, and Bandit does a weird analogy with rocks. Also, they do an arson. Bluey! Okay, I kind of understand Spy Games criticisms, despite my personal connection to it. On top of the unusualness this episode shares with magic, this entire experience is just a cacophony of nonsense, and characters fighting without overt redeeming qualities. So even though it hurts me to do this, I will say that it's justified.
Also, I think this is the only episode that I discussed in my original Bluey lore video that MatPat doesn't in his lore video, so that makes my video better than his. Okay, thank you.
Oh, we are finally in the final 5 episodes on this list, starting with Horsey Ride! Yay! Let me give you a piece of advice. Never try to explain this episode to someone who has never watched Bluey before. Worst mistake of my life. And that is saying something. Okay, so Uncle Stripe gets married to Bingo and Bluey's dad so they can distract their cousin from chewing on a puppy. Also, they are horses. Do I think this episode deserves to be this far on down on the list? Yes, I've said it before. I will say it again. I do not like Bandit abuse. Subscribe. I don't want to dwell on this episode. So, Justified. Bald Bandit. The next episode with an IMDb score of 7.3 is Shops. I mean Markets. I mean, it's Shops. Look, they have 150 episodes. Some are gonna have some other names. I think out of all the episodes on this list, this is the only one that I actually couldn't finish on my first watch through of Bluey. So Bluey and her friends want to play a game, but every time they're about to start, they have a disagreement about something and have to postpone the start of the game, and oh my jumping jumper shoes. It's like every aspect about this episode is designed from the ground up to be as frustrating and annoying as possible. Even the music! The song used in this episode is Offenbach's Can Can, but not the part which you know and love. The build-up. The long-winded intro bit that builds up only to drop out before the music drop, and I hate it. And I love that I hate it. Look, this episode is a slog to get through. But also, isn't that kind of the point? It makes it so that when you get to the end of the episode and finally get the music drop and all the kids get to play the game, it feels so much more satisfying. Do I think this is a good episode? Kinda? If something is designed to be frustrating, then is saying that it's frustrating actually a critique? I don't know, so I'll just say unjustified and move on. Remember when I said earlier that Bluey almost always avoids politics? What if I told you there was an entire episode built on the concept of politics? That's right, it's time for Circus, with a score of 7.2. This episode actually begins with a reference to Shops, and that's funny. Anyway, it's voting day, and all the parents are at booths, and all the kids are playing, you guessed it, Circus. So what political topic does this episode cover? None of them. I said this episode was about politics, not that it was political. It's an entire episode discussing what it means to be a good boss and a bad boss, and it discusses free will and yada yada. Coco has a crush on Mackenzie. He just can't catch a break, can he? I think why this episode is frustrating is how much of a Kai word this Heracles is. In order to set up good leadership versus bad leadership, you need a bad leader. And Heracles is pushy, doesn't account for anyone's well-being, and uses the force to get his way. And at the end of the episode, Bluey, the good leader, makes him the strong man, and suddenly he's just friendly and nice? I don't know. I didn't get any lime lessons out of this one other than don't be a bad person, so I don't know, justified. We're almost done. Just 2 more episodes left. What is now? No. Tina. To put into perspective how bad this episode is, they literally have an episode half a season later whose entire point was to redo the lesson of this one, but better. I'm getting ahead of myself, so let me explain. Bluey and Bingo ask why Mom and Dad get to boss them around, and Bandit's response with, because I'm bigger than you. And so the kids bring home a giant imaginary friend that they use to do a hostile takeover of the house and become grubs. Yes, this is a real episode. At the end, the kids realize that being a grub stinks because, well, it literally stinks. And so maybe the parents are right about their authority. But at this point, what's the point? The message is so convoluted and like, why are the parents even playing along with this? I know they are the king and queen of sticking to the bit, but what are we doing here? As I mentioned earlier, Show and Tell is an episode that comes out later that season, literally calls this one out and redos the same moral of parents know what they are doing 1,000,000 times better. This rating is justified. What could possibly be worse than this? I have watched some of the worst Bluey episodes of all time for this episode, but only one can take the prize for the lowest ranked episode of Bluey on IMDb. One awful, abhorrent, heinous episode can take the cake, and that episode is Wild Girls. Wait, what? No, it has to be Magic Xylophone or Burger Shop. Our hairdressers are Wild Girls? Indy, Coco, and Chloe are playing a game of Wild Girls, but Indy and Chloe are getting bored. They discover that the other kids are playing farmers and want to join them. Coco says no, and that games can't change. We will ignore Shadowlands and pretend like this was a consistent character trait. Eventually, she decides to become the Pink Witch of the Woods and scare the farmers into giving her food so that they can play together again. All things considered, this episode is kinda good. So why does it have the lowest score? The only reason I can think of for this episode being so low is because of when it came out. The second half of season 3. This era of Bluey is so oversaturated by pure awesomeness. From onesies to space, stick bird to dragons, cricket to the sign, there is not a bad episode here. If Wild Girls came out during season 2, it probably wouldn't be this far down. But because it's surrounded by literal masterpieces, it looks so much worse in comparison. So I'll give this episode unjustified. But before you go, I just want to say one more thing, because I just watched all of the worst episodes of Bluey, and I want to yap about the lore really quickly. So according to my Bluey theory, a couple hundred years ago, the fairies had children with normal people that would later integrate with society and become the magic users like Bingo and Chili. Stick with me. Now, admittedly, this part of the theory wasn't that supported. Basically just the fact that in the adventure, the fairy was referred to as grandmother. However, if we look at Wild Girls, what do we see? An isolated family whose children integrate into society while the parent becomes a cryptid-like creature that everyone but their descendants fears. Just like the fairies in the episode Fairies. And if you think that's a stretch, what do you think this is that they make at the start of the episode? That's right, that's a fairy circle. Alright, rant over. This was a longer video, but thank you for watching. Now, what is the takeaway from this video? I don't know. A lot of these episodes I don't think deserve to be on this list. And there are a lot of episodes that I do think deserve to be on this list that aren't. But at the end of the day, it's all subjective. Also, the worst episode of Bluey is rated 7 out of 10. That's insane! Bluey is truly an exceptional show. Alright, I'll see you later. Have a wonderful day! That's the end.
Dr. Warden, tell me about your project.
Oh, it's going well.
Really?
Yes?
Because according to these reports, you haven't made any progress in over a year.
Well, look, it's not my fault we're doing our best. And it will take us as long as we need.
I'm sure, but unfortunately, that's too long.
What are you saying?
I'm saying you have 3 months to get your anomaly under control. After that, we are going to take matters into our own hands.
Whatever happened to patience?
I've given you all of my patience. For your sake, and for the good of everyone else, this needs to end.